Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by FantasyGuru.com. Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. Ray Flowers breaks it all down for you from a fantasy sports perspective. Welcome to FantasyGuru.com's Fantasy Sports Daily. I'm Ray Flowers. I'm your host Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. On Wednesdays, Justin Fensterman stops by and hosts this show. Bottom line is we're on Monday through Friday at about 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, talking fantasy sports. Right now, we're deep in the middle of football season, so obviously that's where our focus is, and that's where our focus will be today. How do you like my Guinness shirt? My Guinness hockey jersey. Felt like doing something a little bit different today. So I got a Guinness hockey jersey. For those of you watching live, welcome. For those of you listening live, welcome. For those of you listening on demand, wherever it might be, welcome as well. Again, I'm Ray Flowers, FantasyGuru.com. You can find my work at FG. You can find me on Twitter, X, Instagram, at the Ray Flowers. And you can find me again here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. On Wednesdays, I'm on the Elite Sports Show with Jeff Manns. That show is Monday through Friday at 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. So Monday through Friday, Jeff's got the show on Sirius. Monday through Friday, we've got the show here. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm here. Wednesdays, I'm with Jeff from 3 to 6 Eastern. Lots to talk about today. Let's just dive into it. Let's just throw up the screen. There it is. That's what we're talking about, Monday Night Football. The Dolphins defeated the Rams 23-15. We'll talk about that. Bears making moves. Uncertainty at the quarterback position across the land. We've got changes in the backfields that we're going to discuss. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. We'll even talk some tight end action. Let's get going. Some tight end action. And then in about 25, 30 minutes from now, as we do every Tuesday, Armando Marsal of FantasyGuru.com will join us. He'll stop by and we'll have a discussion. We'll talk about the waiver wire. Drake Maye, Audric Estime, Tyjae Spears, Trey Benson, Gus Edwards, Cam Akers, Adonai Mitchell, MVS, who had the 2 touchdowns. Quentin Johnston, Will Dissly, Dawson Knox. We'll talk to Armando about that in about 25, 30 minutes. I see Fred there saying he loves the jersey. Thank you, Fred. Appreciate it. A little chilly. I was talking about it yesterday on the show. The fact that we finally got the, I guess, winterish weather starting to come into the Bay Area. It's a cool day today. It's sunny. There's no rain. There's no wind at all. We're going to be dipping into the high 30s. Ooh, cold for the Bay Area. High 30s here the next couple of days. So I figured I'd throw on a little bit of a shirt. By the way, for those of you that didn't know, we are sponsored by FantasyGuru.com. This is a free show, as you are aware, because you're watching it. If you are watching it live on Twitter X at Fantasy Guru site, welcome. If you're on YouTube at youtube.com/@ElitePlusNetwork, you can comment, ask questions, and we'll address those throughout the show like we did right there with Fred. We'll talk a little bit to those of you leaving comments there. Well, those of you on Facebook at facebook.com/FantasyGuruHQ. You can watch, listen, leave questions live. We'll address those here. You can always type in Fantasy Sports Daily to your podcast network. And, of course, go to FantasyGuru.com and just click on the subscribe tab in the top right corner to sign up for any of our products, or click on the Elite Plus tab at the top to find this show. That's right. All right. Let's get into it. We're going to talk some Monday Night Football here. I already see comments coming in. I appreciate that. We'll continue to address those as I noted throughout the show. Rams fell to the Dolphins 23-15, and lots to talk about in this game. First of all, the situation with Tyreek Hill. I mean, Tyreek Hill played, and as we were in Discord talking yesterday at FantasyGuru.com, my advice and the advice of the staff was basically, look, if Tyreek's out there, we're playing him. We got the news he was out there dealing with the wrist injury. He played. It didn't do anything. He caught 3 balls for 16 yards, luckily got in the end zone to save his fantasy day. And the broader picture here with the Miami Dolphins, and whether we're talking about Tua or Hill or even Waddle, is this offense is doing nothing. Since Tua Tagovailoa's return, it's been fine. Like, he's been perfectly acceptable as an NFL quarterback. He's completing passes. He's keeping the offense moving. He's not doing anything. I mean, in his 3 games since he's returned, he has not thrown for 235 yards a single time. He's got 4 touchdown passes. He's completing 75% of his passes, which is great. But if you look at him this season, he's played 5 games, got 6 touchdowns and 4 picks, averaging 231 yards. There ain't nothing happening. And so as a result of there nothing happening in the offense, a guy like Tyreek Hill, who's been an explosive elite Hall of Fame level producer in the recent past, i.e. last year when he had 1,799 yards and 13 touchdowns. Oh, by the way, the year before he had 1,710 yards and 7 touchdowns. Caught 119 passes both seasons. Caught 111 before that. Yeah, right? Okay. This year, 37 catches and 2 touchdowns. His only game this season, the entire year, his only game where he's had 7 catches was week 1. The only game where Hill has had 85 receiving yards was week 1. He scored last night, which was his first touchdown since, say it with me, week 1. There's been a lot of people complaining about players that they overdrafted or that haven't paid off. I'm really surprised at the lack of people complaining about Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill has been a bomb. He has been absolutely atrocious in terms of expectations. Over the course of the season, let's look at his numbers so I can pull them up real quickly, his fantasy numbers. Last year, he averaged 24 PPR points. The year before that, 20 PPR points a game. This year, 11. So legitimately, what he's doing this season is half of what he's done the last 2 years. Legitimately. Don't hear many people complaining about him. I'm not really sure why. Because, again, so why, Ray, did you say to start him? Well, because, and I hate to say this, he's Tyreek Hill. He can take any – they're not each team's got a guy or two that can do it, right? But Tyreek can legitimately take a 4-yard dump off to the house. He's going to be the focus of his offense, you'd think. And then you look at his last 2 games, 9 targets. So remember last year when everything was going right for the Dolphins, I think the bottom line is the following. The skill players are all the same. The problem is the offensive line. And this is something that was addressed at fantasyguru.com before the season began, the concerns that we had about the offensive line. Then we mix in a little bit of Tua concern. We've seen Tua miss some games. And this team looks nothing, not even a semblance of the team that they were last year. Are you still starting Tyreek Hill every week? Yes. Are you still starting Devon Achane every week? Yes. Are you starting everyone else as a must? Do you have to start Tua? No. Do you have to start Waddle? No. Johnny Smith? No. There's no one in this offense other than Achane and Hill that you've got to start. So Tua is struggling, and that's struggling to put up numbers. Again, he's performing admirably. He's just not doing anything. He's getting rid of the ball. I think they're trying to protect him, 1, because of his head, 2, because of the offensive line woes. He's just taking a 5-step drop, throwing it, 3-step drop, throwing it, 5-step drop, throwing it. Like there's nothing. Makes one read, and if it's not there, he's throwing it to the second read. Like there's no scrambling. There's no delay. There's no let's go through 3 or 4 progressions. Not happening. He's just getting the ball out. So it's impacting the entire offense. Speaking of impacting the entire offense, we'll come back to Waddle in a second just because it's the order I wrote the players down in there on the screen. I want to stay in order. We got some issues in the backfield. Now, Devon Achane didn't do anything last night, but if you're in a PPR setup, he still barely got to 10 points because he caught 5 passes. He's played 5 games with Tua as the starting quarterback, 7 catches, 7 catches, 6 catches, 8 catches, 5 catches. So all 5 games, he's caught at least 5 passes, which is giving him immense value in the fantasy space. So last night obviously was his lowest number as well with 5. He had 76, 69, 50, 58 yards. So each of the previous 4 games last night, Achane had caught at least 6 passes for 50 yards. Last night he caught 5 for 15. That's okay because he was effective on the ground, but he wasn't. Yesterday was his worst game in 4. He'd run for 77 yards, 97 yards, 63 yards. Last night, 12 carries for 37 yards. Barely got to 10 PPR points, and he caught 5 passes. Woof. Now, again, Achane is someone you just still start. I mean, it's just since the bye week, his PPR average has been, 19.9 points. You still fire up him. He's doing all of this work. He's actually got more receiving scores, 3, than rushing, 2. But his involvement in the passing game is just immense. It's not coming, quote unquote, at the expense of Waddle or Tyreek Hill, but he's the most consistent pass catcher on this team. That's saying something. Now, the really interesting thing is Raheem Mostert, who scored 107 touchdowns last season. He had 18 rushing touchdowns, 3 receiving. He did have 21 touchdowns. Through 6 games this year, has 2. Predicted pullback. No one was pushing him on draft day. Everyone was saying, all these kind of stuff. All like, okay, great. But this is wild. He's basically been touching the ball, 10 times a week. If you look at his games, 8 touches, 21 touches, 11 touches, 10 touches, 12 touches. Last night, 2. Oddly, Devon Achane played 5 snaps on third down last night. Mostert played 8. Every one of Mostert's snaps were on third down. He didn't play a single first and second down snap. Is he the new third down back because of his pass blocking? Is it that bad with the offensive line that they'd rather have him out there on third down than Achane? That's what we saw last night. Jalen Wright was also active. Jalen Wright was the guy that played first and second downs when they needed a breather with Achane. It wasn't Mostert, who, again, played 0 snaps on first and second down. So clearly, as I said earlier, the only running back that we can trust on this offense or even consider using is Achane. If Achane were to go down with an injury, something that's happened frequently in his young career, is Wright the first and second down back and Mostert's now the third down back? Because, again, that's exactly what we saw last night. Was that a one-off? Did they see something against the Rams they wanted to combat? Next week will be very important there because, again, Achane is one of the most injury-prone, is that the right word? Running backs in football. We've got to know how this team is going to handle things in the backfield. The assumption has always been it would be Mostert, but last night, what we saw, I don't know. Finally, on this side of the things, Jalen Waddle. Look, Jalen Waddle, no one has been hurt more this year by the offense than Jalen Waddle, and that's even including Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle has 1 game of 5 catches. It was week 1. Jalen Waddle has 1 game of 60 yards. It was week 1. Jalen Waddle has 1 touchdown all season long. Oh, and by the way, Jalen Waddle, who as a rookie caught 100 passes for 1,000 yards, in year 2 caught 75 passes for 1,300 yards, who in year 3 caught 72 passes for 1,000 yards. That guy has 1 game this year of 9 PPR points. It was week 1. Woof. This offense is bad with the Dolphins. We got to forget what happened last year. It's just bad this season. On the other side of things, the Rams lost the football game. The Dolphins improved to 3-6. The Rams fell to 4-5. All of a sudden, the Rams, who were kind of streaking, lots of playoff talk, they're now 4-5. The offense wasn't able to score last night. Cardi had 5 field goals. So if you had him in fantasy, I don't know why you're using kickers, but if you did, there you go. The offense didn't produce any touchdowns. Matthew Stafford had a solid effort, 32 for 46, 293 yards, but no touchdowns and a pick. This was his first down effort the last 3, but he's only got 2 games this season, if I'm not mistaken, with 2 touchdown passes. Now, it's 2 the last 3 weeks, but he, feeling good about Nacua coming back, Kupp coming back, moved the football, but weren't able to do anything last night. He threw for 293 yards. Williams ran for 60. They had 350 yards of offense. Couldn't score a touchdown. So Stafford ended up being a disappointment. If he had done what was expected in this matchup, which was 275-2, but he didn't. So Stafford was a poor play, and I said to everyone, play him this week. Poor decision. Didn't work out. Oh, excuse me. Good decision, bad results. Don't beat yourself up if that's how things go. Sometimes that's how things go. Right decision to play Stafford. Bad results for Stafford. Now, Kyren Williams, you look at his effort, 15 carries for 62 yards, 5 catches for 20 yards, and you think, still 20 touches and 80-plus yards from scrimmage. The problem was he didn't get in the end zone. He scored 10 times the first 7 games, and he hasn't scored the last 2 games. His touch count hasn't changed. His yards from scrimmage is down just a teeny bit the last 2 weeks. It's basically the same. The difference has been getting in the end zone. We know that the Rams put an emphasis on getting Kyren in the end zone. That'll probably happen the next game for the Rams. Continue to start Kyren Williams, no concerns. Auto start. Just an effort last night that was fine, but he didn't get in the end zone, so it was fine. It wasn't good. Blake Corum. I've had a lot of Blake Corum questions in Discord over at fantasyguru.com. We've talked about it here. Let's just be very clear about this. I'm getting really tired of answering Blake Corum questions, if we're being honest. Really tired of it. Because nothing that has happened to this point in time with the Rams, not a single thing that's happened at this point in time, is any different than what you all should have been expecting this to be. Kyren Williams is going to play 90% of the snaps. He's going to get 95% of the touches out of the backfield. That's the way it's go. Corum is never going to see the field. Last night he had 3 touches on 5 snaps. He's not going to see the field. He's not going to touch the ball. If you're going to drop Blake Corum because that's what's happening, you should have never added him in the first place because that's always what was going to happen. The reason that I'm a fan of Blake Corum and why we at fantasyguru.com still talk about him is because if Kyren Williams goes down, it's very likely, if not probable, that Blake Corum is now touching the ball 18 times a week. in an offense where the running back, no matter who it's been since Sean McVay has been there, no matter who it's been, has been a running back one. That's why you hold Blake Corum. Okay, it's not because you're trying to get a backup running back that's going to score 8 points a week. He ain't going to do that. It's not what he should have been rostered at any point this season with the expectation of that. His only reason for being rostered is if Kyren Williams goes down, Corum explodes. Getting really tired of answering questions about Blake Corum. Cooper Kupp last night, 7 catches for 80 yards on 7 targets. Another efficient, strong game for him. He's basically, had 4 healthy games and averaging 7 catches and 80 yards, basically like he did last night in the 4 games. Like he is what he is, right? He's a very good, very solid, very stable performer. Puka Nacua, on the other hand, 14 targets, massive target total. 9 catches for 98 yards. Again, neither get in the end zone, so both have good games, but not big games. This is the way this offense is going to operate. It's going to be very pyramidal, right? As we've talked about a lot. Allen, by the way, the tight end, Kobe Parkinson's no longer a thing. He doesn't even play. Allen's the tight end to own with the Rams. 6 targets, 5 catches last night. Very interesting. He was more involved last night from a target, catch, yardage perspective than every game the rest of the season combined. But Parkinson's no longer a thing. It's now Allen at tight end. But back to Puka and Kupp, this is what we're going to see. We're going to see 20 targets a week to these two guys. We're going to see 15 to 18 catches from these guys. And we're going to see 175 yards offense. That's what we're likely to see. So nothing that happened last night in terms of those two guys is appreciably different than what should have been expected. Nice to see Puka play a full game and not punch somebody. That was nice. But yeah, so that's basically what we got in this game, 23-15. A pretty boring game. Not a lot of fantasy standouts, but some of the storylines that we went through, well, there it is. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay. Senor Rojo says, I wish my Bears fired the head coach as well. Let's talk a little bit about the Bears. The Bears have fired their OC, Shane Waldron. Shane Waldron flamed out last year. He flamed out this year. Last year it was with Seattle. Thomas Brown, the former Panthers offensive coordinator, is going to now take over with the Bears. We talked about this yesterday on the show. Jeff Manns went on this on detail on the Elite Sports Show again, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 Eastern on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. The Bears are a mess. They're just a mess. And, do you want to fire the head coach, Eberflus? I think everyone, and this is not a new storyline, everyone's been talking about Eberflus and is he the right guy for this job since at least the offseason this year, if not prior to that. And, at some point, the buck stops here, right? Little Truman action. You got rid of the OC now. Okay, they're making moves, the Bears. The problem with this is the Bears are spiraling the drain, and I don't think anyone legitimately thinks that Eberflus is going to be the coach of this team next year. You got players seemingly quitting on the field. You got players not paying attention on the field. You're now firing coaches. Like it's a mess. I don't think that this move to get rid of Waldron is going to hurt the offense. Hopefully, Thomas Brown will inject some different looks and schemes that will improve the offense. I don't know if that's the case, though. We've talked about this a lot. And, next guy up is Caleb Williams here. Let's talk about him. Caleb Williams kind of plays into this. And this is a running storyline that we have discussed forever. And that is that these teams take these quarterbacks in the first round nowadays, and they immediately start them. Is that the right decision? Well, Justin Fields was pretty good last season for the Bears, working with nowhere near this talent in terms of skill players that Caleb Williams has this year, because obviously they added Keenan Allen and Roma Dunze at the wide receiver spot. What's happened this year? Nothing. DJ Moore, who was a star last season with Justin Fields, with Caleb Williams this year, nothing. Now, again, I'm not blaming Caleb Williams. I'm just pointing out the fact that everyone wanted to get rid of Justin Fields to draft Caleb Williams. It's gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better. Now, in the case of Caleb Williams directly, Jeff Howe of The Athletic said that it's because of the regression we're seeing, and this, again, is a beat writer for The Athletic, but he says that, there are concerns now about Caleb Williams and whether he can be the franchise leader at the quarterback position moving forward. Is that fair to Caleb Williams? Is it? He hasn't even played. I mean, he hasn't even played 10 games. He hasn't even played a full season yet. And we're already gonna say he's no longer the answer. This is the problem with teams. NFL teams treat the quarterback position like they're playing fantasy football, and it's bizarre. Part of the problem for Caleb Williams, he obviously hasn't been coached out of some of the mistakes he makes on the football field. Sometimes he holds the ball too long. Sometimes he tries to play hero ball. He makes bad decisions, throwing the ball across the field, all these things. He did it in college. It works. Doesn't work at the NFL level. We all know that. Everyone knows that. So why haven't the coaching staff coached it out of him? That's point number one. Can't blame Williams. The coaching staff is not helping him correct his mistakes, his flaws. Secondly, he leads football in sacks taken 38. The offensive line has not done a good job. Now, again, some of this is him running around for 6 seconds, make your reads, throw the ball out of bounds. Okay. But some of this is also the offensive line. It's just not good. They're just not doing an effective job. So we're changing OCs. Let's give Williams some time, right? To see if he's got something here. In the fantasy space, we've already moved on from Caleb Williams. He's not a starting option. Even as a second quarterback, he's in a super flex league. He's really rough. You're getting 150 yards and the touchdown every other game. Like, it's really rough. So I don't know of many formats, other than a 2-quarterback league, even in a super flex league, are you starting Caleb Williams with confidence? And the answer is no. But there still are 3 good weapons. There's not many teams that have 3 guys like Odunze, Allen, and Moore. Like, those are 3 really good options at the wide receiver position. We'll see if Cole Kmet is reinserted into the offense, because he's basically vanished from it the last couple of weeks. Don't forget the Bears are scoring 9 points a game the last 3 weeks or whatever the hell it is. We'll see if the change at the OC makes a difference. But yeah, I'm just shocked by the Caleb Williams stuff. I guess I'm not, because that's how people are nowadays. But goodness gracious, man. It's not Anthony Richardson out there. It's really weird. Speaking of young quarterbacks, Bryce Young is winning football games for a Panthers team that's not very good. Bryce Young has not played well the last couple of times out, but he hasn't played poorly. He's just been a guy. Interestingly enough, the head coach of the Panthers, Dave Canales, said when they asked him, who's going to be your quarterback when you return from the bye next week, he said, we'll see. Again, I don't know, man. You made this decision as an organization. Clearly, it was the wrong decision, but the decision has been made. Are they already in Bryce Young as a backup mode? We're trading him for a 6th-round pick mode. Are they already there? Because if they're going back to Andy Dalton at this point, Bryce Young is done with the Panthers. That's how you have to read that situation, right? Now, nobody is playing Bryce Young in the fantasy space, even in the super flex. You're desperate if you do that. It would be better for us if they had Dalton there, but obviously the receiving core is diminished. Johnston's gone. They got rid of Mingo. They can't get Thielen healthy. It's Hubbard or bust, really, right? Tavian Sanders, who we talked about last week, coming on, had another touchdown this week, all that kind of stuff. But this offense is rough, and the bottom line is we don't know who's going to be the quarterback moving forward, which is kind of surprising. Dak Prescott, we know, will not be the quarterback the rest of the season. He has finally made the decision to have surgery on his hamstring. His season is over. This escalated from the injury wasn't too serious to the things torn away from the bone, having surgery, and his season's over pretty quick. We talked about it yesterday. We saw Cooper Rush fail in week one of his starting, week 10, but his first start of the season. We saw Trey Lance come in and try to invigorate the offense. He failed. Trey Lance is an intriguing pickup in 2-quarterback super flex leagues if he's still out there. Cooper Rush should be much better than he was last week. We've seen him quarterback before. He's been fine. Should be much better than he was last week, but that was a historically atrocious effort last week from him. 45 yards passing on 23 attempts. So Trey Lance, you got an empty roster spot. It will be ugly if Trey Lance is out there. It's basically Anthony Richardson's zone. But the wheels, man. The wheels, baby. Doug Peterson, the head coach of the Jaguars, who might get fired. I'm surprised they've kept him there. We've talked about that. Shoulder issue for Trevor Lawrence, didn't play last week. We're unclear if he's going to play this week. Head coach Doug Peterson said we don't have anything definitive yet. So might be Mac Jones again. Mac Jones was historically atrocious yesterday too, or 2 days ago, for the Jaguars. Don't know who's going to quarterback this team. Don't know how much it matters at this point. Brian Thomas, since he's come back from his chest injury, has done nothing. He obviously needs Trevor Lawrence because Lawrence is better or more adept at the deep ball than Mac Jones is. But that's another offense where it's Evan Ingram or bust right now as a receiver. We've got to get Thomas healthy and got to get Trevor Lawrence back out there. This next one is interesting, and we'll talk to Armando Marsal about Audric Estime. For those people who've watched the show, we've talked about Estime on this show. We've talked about Estime repeatedly in articles over at fantasyguru.com. We talked about Estime in Discord last week. Jeff Mans all week long on his show on SiriusXM all week long said Estime. As we discussed yesterday on this show, Estime comes out and gets 14 touches and Javonte Williams gets 3. So now every waiver wire article I looked at this morning, Estime. We were a week ahead of this at fantasyguru.com. Just the truth. And we have been a week ahead this season for those people wondering, should I sign up for Fantasy Guru? We've been a week ahead on these guys on the waiver wire almost all year long. I mean, the prime example we've given is on this show when Kareem Hunt was going to have an interview with the Chiefs to see if he was going to even sign with the team. I said right here on this show that morning, 20 minutes after the story broke, you want to add Kareem Hunt. You don't want to add Carson Steele. You don't want Sanjay Piran. You want Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt's hit. That's an example. Estime is another example. So we're ahead of things here at fantasyguru.com, and everyone at FG knows it because everyone on our teams have got Estime. Now, Estime is not owned anywhere. His ownership rate is tiny. No one that had Javonte Williams bothered, I guess, to take Estime, which I find weird. We talk about handcuffing all the time, too. Just because there was the one-off week where Estime takes over does not mean Estime or bust. I'm not saying that. Jeff's not saying that. The crew at FG is not saying that. But what we're saying is what we said last week before the game, that Estime's got a chance to take over the backfield. Sean Payton came out after the game and said, look, Estime looked good, and he's going to continue to get reps. So we'll talk to Armando Marsal in a few minutes and kind of get his thoughts on Audric Estime. Hopefully you added him last week because if you're adding him this week, it's going to cost you. DK Metcalf, talking about the wide receiver spot. He's got that knee issue. He's expected to practice tomorrow. And he's fully expected at this point to play through the knee injury. Obviously, he has lost the last couple of weeks has been significant. I have him everywhere. I've been dealing with the Tiptons and Washingtons and Adonai Mitchells of the world. At least Mitchell hit. The other two guys didn't. So, we're all going to be really glad to see DK Metcalf back out there. It's expected to be this week. We'll watch the injury reports all week long to get the determination on his outlook for the week. But he is expected to play at practice tomorrow. That'll be a great first step to getting him back out on the field when it counts. Keon Coleman, who we talked about on this show, who was week to week, famously week to week. Then the next day, his coach said he could play this week. And I said, you can't be week to week. And the first week you're hurt. We've talked about this a lot. They've already ruled him out this week. So they ruled him out already because of the wrist injury he's dealing with. So how much of a lie was it last week when they said he could potentially play last week? It's Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning. He was ruled out on Monday. The NFL apparently, we talk about this all the time. The NFL doesn't care about teams lying. It's really... So anyway, Keon Coleman's out this week. We still don't know about Amari Cooper. Expecting him to play. T. Higgins got the quad injury. He's being called day to day. I guess he's got a chance to play this week. T. Higgins is extremely frustrating. If you have Higgins, you activate him and put him in your lineup if he plays. He's been very productive when on the football field for the majority of his career, including this season. Joe Burrow's playing at an absolutely elite level right now, throwing passes. So T. Higgins, if he's out there, we're playing him. But he's missed the last 2 games with the quad injury. Obviously, his return, and it's not this simple, but his return would obviously also knock down Mike Gesicki. There's been a correlation there between production from Higgins and then nothing from Gesicki, vice versa when Higgins is out. But Gesicki still continues to share, even though Eric All is out, still continues to share snaps and looks with 2 other guys, Sample and Hudson, at the tight end position with that team. Chris Olave, not officially done for the season, but they said because of his head injury, he's obviously on the IR now. He's going to miss at least the next 4 games. I'd be surprised if he played again this year. If you have him and you have an IR spot, no harm in stashing him. If you don't have an IR spot, adios, Chris Olave. No point to be carrying him at this point in time. And then a couple of guys at tight end spot before we visit with Armando Marsal. Number 1. Actually, just one guy to talk about. What am I saying? I'm looking at the wrong list. Sam LaPorta's got that shoulder issue we talked about yesterday. He's being called by his head coach, Dan Campbell, as hopeful to play this week. He's got the AC sprain joint in the shoulder. I've been learning about the shoulder an awful lot lately. I hurt my own shoulder recently. I don't know if he plays. My guesstimate at this point of the week, and again, it's a Tuesday morning, my guesstimate is that he doesn't play this week. So make sure if you're going to the waiver wires tonight, as much as we don't like carrying 2 tight ends, if you've got LaPorta, pick up a second tight end because you got to have some coverage there just in case he's unavailable this week with the shoulder injury. So that's our review of Monday Night Football, kind of some bigger storylines. We'll obviously continue to do exactly that over at fantasyguru.com. Hit us up in Discord for questions. Back and forth. We'll help you set lineups, make roster moves. Don't ask me questions. Start 6. I don't do that till Wednesday. But you can ask the rest of the staff if you want. They'll probably say the same thing. Let's bring in the guy that we talked to. I saw him smile when I made that comment. Let's bring the guy in that comes every Tuesday to join us here on Fantasy Sports Daily. You can find his podcast, Mind of Marsal, if you go to fantasyguru.com. You click that Elite Plus tab at the top. That's where you can find this show. You can also find his show, Mind of Marsal. He comes on every Tuesday at about 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. It's that time. Let's welcome in Armando Marsal of fantasyguru.com. How you doing, Armando?
I'm doing good, Ray. How about yourself?
Doing okay. I saw you smile with that startup setup. It's really, I get it, because we're all busy and there's so many questions and people want to get answers and all that. I still am always stunned by people asking stardom sit-em questions. If it's a Thursday night game, okay. But if they're playing on Sunday, I mean, we could go through a list of 120 guys that are beat up physically, and it changes so many things. Are you still surprised that that's something we kind of have to fend off? People asking stardom sit-em so early in the week?
Yeah, I think so. Like this morning, there was a question that involved Metcalf. It's one of those situations where we have to look at practice reports. We have to see where he's at the end of the week, and especially when it deals with injured players, I think waiting until we get all of the practice reports throughout the week, especially like you said, if they're not playing on Thursday, the more information we have, the better it is, right? It's the best decision we can make with that information. So unless someone's playing on Thursday, or unless you need to make a move, for a specific player on a Tuesday, really no need to be making those decisions early on in the week.
Agreed. Let's talk about some waiver wire. Now, this is always difficult because, if you're in a super flex league or a 2-quarterback league or a 10-team league or a 14-team league, or you have 16 roster spots or 20, we know how this goes. So this is a general, let's look at some players as much as, hey, do we got to add this guy this week? The quarterback I want to talk to you about is Drake Maye, because, he's making mistakes, which young players do. But he's also producing fantasy points. He's using his legs, which is nice because anytime a quarterback can run for 30 or 40 yards a week, that's a huge bonus. Is Drake Maye just a super flex option? Are you seeing enough out of him that you would consider in any matchup at this point to start him as your QB1?
I prefer him in super flex and 2-quarterback leagues. But like you mentioned, I mean, in games that he's completed and started, he's finished as QB 18 or better. He has 2 top 10 finishes. He has that, upside because of what he's able to do with his legs and the rushing ability that you mentioned. So, he's making mistakes like you mentioned, but he's also playing pretty solid. He's made some good decisions. He's completed over 60% of his passes in all the games besides that Jets game that he left early. So I think he's done a solid job. I don't necessarily think you need to start him in a 1-quarterback league, outside of, emergency situation or a very good matchup. But I do think that you can make a strong case for him being your QB2 in a super flex or 2-quarterback league here moving forward.
And remember, we don't have this week, we don't have Kyler Murray. We don't have Baker Mayfield. We don't have the Carolina quarterback. We got 4 teams on bye this week. So maybe in some leagues, but I agree with Armando. Let's try to not make that guy to Drake Maye this week. Let's talk about the running backs. I gave my thoughts earlier about Audric Estime. I actually gave my thoughts about Audric Estime last week as we were doing over at fantasyguru.com. Talked about how Jeff Mann's harped on this all week. Estime looked like he took over the backfield this previous weekend for the Broncos. No one apparently listened to our advice and added him. So everyone's asking questions about Estime now. What are your thoughts on the backfield? It's easy to look at the way he dominated the touch count last week and say the backfield's his. Is it his? And even if it is his, who is Audric Estime the rest of the way?
So I think he has looked like the better back, right? So I think that's where we got to start. He did look like the better back last week. He dominated the opportunities. He played the most snaps out of all the running backs. I think he's going to continue to earn more and more opportunities, but I don't in any way, shape, or form think he's going to be the only back that's receiving opportunities here. I think they're still going to use Williams, especially as a pass catcher. I think McLaughlin is still going to be involved. I think that they're going to be weeks that they could potentially ride the hot hand. It could be that way where if Williams gets going early on in a game, they might lean on Williams that game. And maybe that could be something we deal with here. But I do think you should add Estime. I think he's going to be the favorite to start earning those early opportunities in games. And as long as he continues to produce at this level, I think he'll continue to see an expanded role here.
Let's drill down on him just for a little bit because we're at that point of the year. We're in double-digit weeks. Again, we got 4 teams on bye. We're going to have 6 coming up here. Like, it's going to get really messy. And, a running back scoring 12 PPR points, like, we're going with that, right? That's going to work for us. A lot of people have spent heavily on the waiver wire. I've already seen some questions about this. Like, I'm down to a third of my seasonal budget left. How aggressive do I get with Audric Estime? And I know it's team dependent and kind of where you're at in standings and all that, but are you aggressively spending to add him? Like if someone's going to, you're hearing the grapevine, someone's going to spend 25% of their seasonal budget to get this guy. Like, is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? Should you be in the more, under 10% zone? It kind of sounds like to me that you're not saying this is the guy to dump all your fab if you got some left. You're sounding like you want to hold on to that.
Yeah, I probably would say 10 to 20%, really dependent on your roster, right? That's where it would be. If you're just looking for a depth add, probably going to lower end. If you're in major need at running back, like if you really need a running back and you need help, yeah, be more aggressive because he's someone you can potentially plug and play. I view him as a RB3 this week, a flex option. Like that's kind of where I'm viewing him. So it really depends on your roster context.
Armando Marsal of fantasyguru.com joining us here like he does every Tuesday on the show. Let's talk about Tyjae Spears. I think you and I have talked about Tony Pollard previously. And I don't know how much of this last game was, Will Levis is back at quarterback. We're going to run things differently. Pollard did leave for a little bit of time. They were looking at him. His body's beat up. He's got the foot, maybe his knee. We've talked about the fact that, he certainly has been nowhere near 20 touches a week for the entirety of an NFL season. And here comes Tyjae Spears finally healthy. Is Spears someone to add right now? And, maybe it ends up being Spears is as productive as Estime the rest of the way at a lesser cost here.
Yeah, we should have been adding Spears weeks ago, right? We've been talking about this now for weeks. Hopefully you listened. But yes, I think Spears is a very strong add. You're going to get him at a cheaper cost than Estime. And I think that there's going to be a solidified role here. You mentioned it. Like Pollard is already kind of breaking down. He received an abundance of opportunities early on, and Spears was out. We were seeing them lean on Pollard. He has that foot injury. He missed time last week with it appears to be a leg injury. They haven't really been very clear on that. So I could see a situation where you start seeing this become more of a committee, right? Where they kind of use Spears a little bit more than Pollard at times and Pollard a little bit more than Spears at times. But I do think you could see anywhere between 10 and 12 opportunities here for Spears on a week-to-week basis. And I think those are going to be valuable opportunities for this young man. So I like the idea. I prefer if I'm in a situation where I don't need an emerge like right now, I would be okay with going after Spears at a much lesser cost.
What about Trey Benson? Like he's starting to, see a little bit of work. He's been pretty productive with that work. Now, people seemingly love adding backup running backs to score 7 points a week, which I don't. Okay, you're not starting Trey Benson unless you're freaking desperate because James Conner's going to touch the ball 18 times. So Conner does have a history though of missing game action. He's a very rugged runner. If Trey Benson's sitting out there, even if you don't have Conner, is he at an interest for you?
Yeah, I'm very interested in him. I think he's someone you want to add, but like you mentioned, you don't want to add him to start him, right? Like you're not depending on him. You're not counting on him to produce for you right now. He's more of a stash, someone who's kind of starting to see a little bit more of a workload, You mentioned Conner does have, he's been able to stay relatively healthy in recent years, but he does have a history of injuries. This is a Cardinals offense. They have a pretty favorable, a schedule. When you look at their schedule, pretty favorable schedule for running backs. So I definitely think that Benson is someone that could be very valuable down the stretch if Conner were to miss time. I think they're seeing that they could be comfortable. They're comfortable with giving him opportunities like we're seeing in recent weeks. So, stash, not someone I want to count on this week.
Armando, what about the situation with Gus Edwards? Talk to us about who Gus Edwards is with J.K. Dobbins on the field because he looked more effective last week. And secondly, if Dobbins goes down with an injury, a lot of people are like, oh, Gus Edwards to the moon. Gus Edwards can't play third downs. Like, does Gus Edwards' role change at all if Dobbins is down, or is it just we see Kamani Vidal more?
I think we're going to see a committee between Vidal and Edwards. Like, that's what I expect if Dobbins were to go down. I actually answered this kind of question earlier in Discord, and that's my thoughts on that. Like, I think Edwards is going to be that 10 to 15 opportunity running back. I think we know that he has a limited ceiling. He'll provide you a pretty decent floor. Going to be very reliable, I think, on scoring touchdowns. That's where his fantasy production is going to be. So, yeah, I think he'll be there early down back with Vidal getting action in that, third down. And you might even see some drives where they lean on Vidal, for that change of pace back. So, if the Dobbins were to go, I view him as a handcuff. That's what I add. That's one with a decent floor and limited upside.
Aaron Jones was carted off the field over the weekend, came back later. So you don't often see guys get carted off the field and then come back in the game. That was kind of weird. But, he's a really good, really productive, integral part of this offense with the Vikings. But he's not Mr. Muscle. He has missed time too, as many running backs have over the years. Ty Chandler was the guy we thought was the backup, but they went the Vikings out and traded again for Cam Akers. They clearly leaned on Cam Akers over the weekend over Ty Chandler. So I'm assuming you're going to say Ty Chandler, unless you have a huge roster, you don't care. Cam Akers, a priority ad if you don't have Aaron Jones, an ad for everybody, even if you don't have Aaron Jones. And since we're talking about all these running backs, is now a good time, even if you don't believe in handcuffing running backs, that you should start handcuffing your running backs?
Yes, 100%. I think this is the time of the season where you want to make sure you have your handcuffs, especially guys like Cam Akers, where you saw the offense. First of all, the team traded for him, and then when the opportunity came, they leaned on him. So I think he's a very valuable ad. If you're an Aaron Jones manager, I think you should prioritize Edwards here Akers here over all of these other running backs. Even if you're not a Jones owner, I think Akers is someone you want to consider off waivers. I think that, like you mentioned, Jones, it's a rib injury that he's dealing with. That's very tricky injury. He get hit very hard again. If they let him play, these are very tricky injuries. If he re-aggravates that, Akers is going to be that guy. And Chandler could be, will maybe get a little bit of work here and there, but it's going to be Akers. We saw that this weekend, and I think they're going to lean on him if Jones were to miss any time.
Armando Marsal of fantasyguru.com. Armando, let's talk about some wide receivers. Adonai Mitchell stepped up and had a pretty good game. Obviously, that was with Michael Pittman being down with injury. Pittman's got the finger. He's got the back. We're expecting Pittman to return to short order maybe the next game. So this is not a scenario where we think at this point in time that Pittman's out long term. So talk us through Adonai Mitchell. What is Mitchell without Pittman on the field? What is Mitchell with Pittman on the field? And how interested are you if he's on the waiver wire as he is in almost every league?
So this goes down to, I think his value is going to be tied with Pittman's health. That's really what it is. If Pittman plays, we can't trust Mitchell. If Pittman is out, we can view Mitchell as a wide receiver 3/flex option for you in PPR formats. I think more, 12-team, 14-team leagues is where you're kind of looking at. I wouldn't consider him in maybe a 10 or 8-team league here. And as far as how much you want to go and invest on him, it really depends on your roster situation, on whether you believe, Pittman's going to play or not. I wouldn't go out and overspend on someone like Mitchell. I think there are other players out there that are still available in a lot of leagues that I would much rather be invested in. I think they're going to be more solidified roles moving forward.
2, it's number of touchdowns he scored last week. 3, number of catches he had last week. 3, number of targets he had last week. 3, the number of initials that we use in his name to reference him. MVS.
No.
Anything?
Look, yes. Okay. So very simple. If you want a player that gives you top 24 upside, top 30 upside, but also gives you a potential 0 on any given week, sure, go ahead and invest in MVS. That's what you're getting. We've seen this before, right? This is not the first time we've seen this. That we've seen this before. If you would have told me that he did this on 10 targets, 9 targets, okay, now you have my attention. 3 targets, 14% target share. No, I can't. This is just. I think if you're in a desperate situation, sure, but understand what you're investing in. You're investing in a highly volatile receiver who's depending on those big plays for a touchdown.
He's a GPP play, and we don't normally use those
Correct.
guys in seasonal fantasy.
Correct.
Quentin Johnston. He's got 5 touchdowns in 6 games, Armando. Now, he's averaging 3 catches and 45 yards. Like, there's no volume, there's no production here. It's really touchdown or bust, but it is 5 and 6 games. Quentin Johnston, talk us through him. And as an example, would you be more interested in adding him than MVS?
So I think he's a safer MVS, right? We're seeing that's really how I view him. You mentioned it. Like, what concerns me about Johnston is he's just so touchdown dependent, right? So, and yes, he scored. I think it's all but 2 games this season, if I'm not mistaken. And he has a 1 game with multiple touchdowns. So that you're just very touchdown dependent. The floor is low. He's been scoring. This is an offense that has passed a little bit more lately. But again, I don't like investing in touchdown dependent players, when there are other options. But yes, I prefer him over MVS on my roster and on my bench.
Let's stay with that team, the Chargers, because Will Dissly, backing up, in the preseason, we identified the Chargers as an offense we'd love to be involved with the tight end position at no cost. Unfortunately, the guy we highlighted was Hayden Hurst, and he bombed. Okay, he got hurt and bombed. But Will Dissly now is doing what we expected this tight end position to do in the Chargers offense. Since the bye week, he's played 5 games. 4 of those 5 games, he's caught 4 passes. And in those 5 games, he's averaged 4.8 catches and 9 PPR points. It's not great. It's not huge, but it's consistently there. He's consistently in the 10 to 15 range every week at the tight end position. He was inches away. The ball just tipped off his fingers last weekend. He almost had a touchdown, right? So all of a sudden, everyone would have been talking about him. Worse options on the waiver wire than Will Dissly, or
I recommended him in DFS last week. You mentioned it. He's offered a pretty steady floor, right? He's accounted for over 20% of the target share in 3 of the last 4 games. 23, 30, and 33 target shares in 3 of the last 4 games. Yeah, I think his role is solidified here. I think you mentioned it. He's doing exactly what we expected Hurts to do here, right? Like, that's what he's doing. And I don't think that role is going to go anywhere. I think, and he's going to be someone that they depend on in the red zone as well at times. So I do think that he's someone that you can add if you've been streaming the position. Like, this is the perfect player where you could add for cheap and he gives you a decent floor. Maybe he doesn't give you that 20+ point upside that some of the other tight ends give you. But if you're looking for 8 to 10 fantasy points, 8 to 12 fantasy points on a week-to-week basis, I think you could get that from Dissly in a PPR setting.
Exact opposite of MVS. Exact opposite.
Very opposite. Like, total opposite.
Yeah. One other tight end to ask, and it's not really as much about him as it is potentially the opportunity. Dalton Kincaid's got the knee injury. We're unclear whether he's going to play this week. Dawson Knox, when we saw him step up with playing time last week, it's not too far in the recent past. This guy was scoring 9-6 touchdowns. The Bills are rolling. Obviously, Josh Allen's comfortable throwing it to Knox and the tight end position. Dawson Knox, I mean, it's early in the week and maybe Kincaid plays and it's a nothing. But if we're talking about $1 or, you're the end of the waiver run, you just want to grab a guy off the waiver wire, what would Knox look like if Kincaid was out?
I think he'd be a high-end tight end too. But the top 15, top 16, I think you can make a case. And again, it depends on your tight end situation, if you have one if you have Auden on bye, I think someone like Knox you can, count on here. You mentioned LaPorta, if you want to add someone like Knox for $1, that's fine with me. Like, it really depends on your tight end situation. But I do think, in deeper leagues, you can consider him, especially if you're a tight end needy team, and kind of see what how it plays out with the injury there in Kincaid.
Ron Marsal of fantasyguru.com. Is there someone, by the way, I don't think I normally ask you this, but is there someone that we haven't listed that you're like, Ray, we should be talking about this guy? Is there anyone obvious that we missed here in this discussion before we look at the chat room and some of the questions folks have?
Yeah, so I actually was surprised this morning. I was messing around with my rosters and things like that and looking at my waiver. And Cedric Tillman is still available in over 45% of ESPN leagues. Like, for me, that was mind-boggling. I'm like, this cannot be accurate. Like, it has to be wrong. But that's the number that it says, percentage of rostered. It's at 50.3. So he's exactly 49.7, percent available. Like, in 49.7% of those leagues. If that's the case, like, if he's available out there, like, he's not someone that should be on any waivers at this time. And maybe, I don't know if you agree with that, but I think he should be rostered in every single league, like even 10-team leagues. I think Tillman is a very strong player to have. And then Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, we've talked about them over and over and over. If they're still out there in your league, again, Adam, I prefer Jennings myself, over the two, but I think both are very good ads if they're still out there. So those are the three receivers I wanted to mention because I feel like they're obvious, but when you look at the numbers, it's mind-boggling how much they're out there.
It is so weird too because you find this in all fantasy sports. I think that we kind of live in a bubble. People that are following this show or with us over at fantasyguru.com, again, click that subscribe tab in the top right corner. Like Ricky Pearsall, 2 weeks ago, we were saying Adam. Audric Estime, 2 weeks ago, we were saying Adam. Cedric Tillman's another perfect example. We said add him before he blew up. Like we're in our know that our users are using this advice to their advantage. But then when you pull back and you realize there are 55 million people playing fantasy football, 55 million, there is a huge percentage of those people that don't know what the hell they're doing. So I mean, because it's not like, come on. I look at some of these numbers too. I go to ESPN or Yahoo, and it's like, this is not possible. Like, and you look, DK Metcalf, I don't know, I'm making this up. He's owned in 88% of the leagues. It's like, what? How is he not? So I try. It's very difficult to do our job. Sometimes we get frustrated because we'll get the question where people have 5 top 25 wide receivers, and which 2 do I sit this week? And it's like, how the hell can this be a thing? But then you look at the waiver wire, and there's wide receiver 3s sitting on the waiver wire. Armando, it's tough, right?
Yeah, it is. It is like and that's what I do. Like I go through the waiver wires and I look, and then I look at players that I'm just like interested in. Like I was trying to trade for Tillman, so I went to the roster, and then I know this when I'm like, wait a minute, that's start or roster? And it's like, no, roster, not even start. Like I understand, okay, 50% of the population is starting him and not the other 50. Okay, fine. But 50%, like 49% on free agent? No way. I'd be like the first one in every single one of those leagues. Add. Like he has to be rostered in every league.
Let's look at some of the comments again. You can leave comments live that we address throughout the show and at the end of the show every time. Elite, it's youtube.com/@elitesports, facebook.com/fantasyguru HQ. Facebook and YouTube, you leave a comment there. We'll see it live and we can address it. John G obviously has been listening to our advice. This isn't really a question, but he's been listening to our advice and picking up the guys we suggested because he clinched a playoff spot, had the highest score of the year this past week, and he said thank you. So you're welcome, John. He's often with us here. Good to hear that things are going in the right direction.
That's awesome, John. Keep it up.
Yeah, let's go. Fred C asks the following question. Now, we talked about a couple of Chiefs and Johnston and Disley. Fred said that I get Jeff, which I assume is Jeff Mans, has you worried about starting Herbert going forward? Well, you should have been worried about starting Herbert at any point up to this point because there's only been like 3 games where he's been worth starting. He is playing Justin Herbert great football. Like I watched that game really closely the other day. He's running. He ran for the touchdown, but he's mobile. He's hitting guys with touch. He's firing balls into tight windows. He is playing tremendous football. He's gone, 217 passes without a pick, something like that. Playing great football. But from a fantasy perspective, there's no consistency here because there's no volume. So for Fred, would you feel more comfortable with Herbert, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Geno Smith, Stafford? When I see these names on the waiver wire, clearly it's a smaller league or no one's carrying second quarterback. So I'm not overly concerned about necessarily having to choose one guy for every week the rest of the season because you're talking about guys that'll be floating in and out of the top 15 each week. Do you see a name there? Wilson, Winston, Smith, Stafford, any of those guys more attractive to you than Justin Herbert?
I think you can make a strong case for all of these, right? But for me, I'm going to go Stafford. With Kupp and Nacua healthy, we know what kind of numbers he's capable of putting up. Yes, it wasn't capable of doing it against the Dolphins last night, but we know the ceiling is there. We know the floor is there. So for me, it's going to be him this week. I think he's a top 12 quarterback this week, so I would go with him. But I agree with you, Ray, right? When you have these options, I think you could add and drop as you go. You don't have to, kind of marry yourself to one for the rest of the season.
I don't like the idea of streaming quarterbacks, just to be clear. I don't like that at all. But I'm not in leagues where these guys are all on the waiver wire. So there's a difference there. And these guys are all, any given week, quarterback 11 to 19, right? They're all kind of the same-ish. Stafford, though, with those weapons, I agree with Armando. It's a pretty good pickup. Let's see what Eric wants to ask about. Eric's in a 20-team league. Whoa, Eric's going deep here. PPR needs to drop one of the following: We're not dropping anybody in a 20-team league. The exact opposite of what we were just talking about with the shallow leagues. Jalen Wright, who we saw last night, Jeremy Nichols, who is handcuffed to Brian Robinson, Vidal, Juju, or Zamir White. Now, I'll say this, Armando. I'm in 14-team leagues where all these guys are owned. So seeing these guys being dropped in a 20-team league makes me kind of nervous, okay? If I had to drop a guy, I'm going Jalen Wright. But you agree or disagree? You're down there in Miami.
He's one guy that I really would love to hold as long as possible because, again, the running backs ahead of him, there's histories with injuries, right? And if any of Achane or Mostert were to go down, I think Wright is going to get a pretty solidified role. The team is giving him more opportunities as of late. But it's really him or Vidal for me. It's kind of where I'm at.
Yep.
It's him or Waddle. I view them very, very similar for the same reasons, right? I think they're both behind two running backs that are fragile. But it's Wright or Waddle for me here, who I'm cutting.
I agree with you. Henry V, by the way, said he lost his matchup because the Rams kicker outscored Kupp and Mostert. How many leagues are you in that you still use kicker? Is that a thing for you still, Armando?
Zero.
Yeah.
I think, the Scott Fish Bowl, you can use kicker, I think, in the flex. But you don't have to start a kicker.
Yeah, you don't have to. The team that's in first place in my league is starting like 4 a week. So that's a very unique scoring system.
Correct.
Yeah, very unique. If you're playing traditional football, don't use a kicker anymore. Jack B said he's Guru Elite. He's got Hunt, Pearsall, Estime all roster because of it. Love hearing that, Jack. Way to go. Way to put a good team together. Jack also says that it's his trade deadline this week. So he was offered Tank Dell for Mark Andrews. He already has Hawkinson. His wide receivers are Chase, Adams, DK Metcalf, and Douglas. That's a really good top 3. I think Douglas is a 4. He's probably better as a 5, but okay. So getting Tank Dell will help there. Is this the trade you would make? And this is the problem that a lot of people have run into, I think, Armando, is everyone rostered Hawkinson because he was hurt. Then he comes back, and for some reason, no one can trade Hawkinson or the other tight end they've got. And so they're sitting there with 2 tight ends wondering what the hell to do.
I like this offer right here. I'm going to go ahead and accept this offer. You already have Hawkinson, and this gives you a very good addition to this receiving group, which I really think it's solid as is. So I think this is a very good trade. Yeah,
Dell becomes your 4, Douglas becomes your 5. Everyone slots where they should be. Yeah, I think this works. I think it works here. David P's got a question. He says, morning, Ray. Morning, Armando, too. Pacheco Hunt. You know how this goes. This is the story that comes up over and over again. In this situation, David's actually doing the opposite of what most people are trying to do. He's wondering if he should trade Hunt to the Pacheco owner. And if he does that, should he get Chase Brown or Tyrone Tracy? What do you think? Should we trade Hunt to the Pacheco owner to get Brown or Tracy?
I think you can make that trade. And I would go with, and this is very close.
See, the thing is, Tracy is on bye this week. So that's something to think about. And Brown is on bye next week. Yeah. So remember, just to say this too, Armando, sorry to cut you off, but I'm seeing this a lot in trade questions. If you're making a trade, check the bye weeks, because I see a lot of people that are making trades that look on the surface pretty good, and then you realize the guy you're sending out's already had his bye, and the guy you're getting hasn't had his bye yet, so you're losing a full game. So keep that in mind. So both Tracy and Brown do have upcoming buys. Tracy this week, but Hunt to the Pacheco owner for Brown or Tracy. What do you think?
I'm going to slightly lean Tracy Jr. here, but I'm okay with making it for either. But like Ray said, like you have to be able to afford to be missing either of the two, either this week or next.
Okay. Senor Rojo has got a question. He's got to basically win out to make the playoffs. He has Mason on his team, Jordan Mason of the Niners. Should he be dropping Garendo for Estime? At this point in time with CMC back and the Niners took the training wheels off, he played 87% of the snaps or whatever the hell it was. I'm not really sure who the backup for the Niners would be. Mason's been so beat up. I think you even said it on the show last week, like you don't really trust Mason. But in this scenario, are you dropping Garendo for Estime? I think it's the move to make at this point.
Yes, I think it's the move to make. Mason and Garendo played identical snaps, and they got, I think, each identical opportunities. I think one each, right? Like, so yes. I would drop Garendo here.
With by the way, CMC, he had 19 touches, which is, and again, he played almost 90% of the snaps. Didn't have the burst exactly. Now, you can't turn your nose against the workload, so we're starting Mason and all that, but were you able to watch the game closely? And if you were, with any takeaways with CMC, I didn't quite see the burst I was hoping to see from him.
That's the only thing he lacked, right? The burst. He wasn't giving you that burst. And I felt like at the beginning, he was a bit tentative at times to take a hit. But he got going after he felt comfortable. I mean, what it does to this offense, right? Like that dynamic that he brings to the table. You saw that touch pass from Purdy to CMC, like he just floated in the air. CMC found it. Like it's just he didn't look his sharpest, but he looked better than I anticipated. He did look better than I thought he was going to be, much slower, and just much rustier. But no, he looked like CMC. 20 opportunities, I think it was, or 21 opportunities. I mean, he's going to continue to see an abundance of opportunities there.
Final question, Armando. This one's from Greg, and he's in the Dynasty League. And again, just so everyone's on the same page, a Dynasty League means you keep your whole roster. Doesn't mean you keep 3 guys. I see people do this all the time. I'm in a Dynasty League. We keep 3 guys. Dynasty League, you're keeping your whole roster. So Greg asks, he's in a Dynasty League. Does he drop Roschon Johnson or Justin Fields to move Estime onto his active roster from his taxi squad? There's no way in hell I'm dropping Justin Fields in a Dynasty League. No way. Because Justin Fields could be starting from someone next year. Absolutely. And let's not forget, was he quarterback 6 when he got benched this year? Can't drop Justin Fields. Roschon Johnson, it depends if you got Swift. It depends what your backfield looks like. But if it's Johnson to Estime, I'm okay with that. Do we make the move, though? We talked about Estime, like he's gaining here, but do we activate him off the taxi squad, or do we hold Roschon Johnson another week?
I would wait this out one more week unless you absolutely need to start Estime. Like that would be the only reason why I would move him out of my taxi squad, is because I need to start him, not because, I want to start him. So I would wait this out one more week and kind of see what happens before I make this move, if you're able to do it. Otherwise, I agree with you. It's Johnston who I would cut, right?
Okay. Marsal of FantasyGuru.com joins us every Tuesday. We talk waiver wire. We take your questions. You can also find him, again, FantasyGuru.com, the Elite Plus tab at the top of the page. That's where you click on to find this show, Fantasy Sports Daily. You can find his show, Mind or Marsal, also there. Basketball Diaries, One Man's Opinion, all the shows are there. Elite Plus tab at the top of the page. You got everything the same as always here, Armando, the next couple of days. Red Zone, targets, coaching stuff, live streams, DFS articles, basically all of it, right?
Yes, and I got the NBA cheat sheet will be up today. I'll be doing that one tonight, so you'll catch that. Obviously, the roster coach live stream. You mentioned the red zone review, the snap breakdown, the usage breakdown, DFS breakdown. Sunday morning live stream, 11 a.m. Eastern, and Discord on Thursday and Sunday. Thursday before game time and Sunday before game time as well. So, safe schedule, Ray.
He's a busy guy, and there's a lot of them. So again, fantasyguru.com, click the subscribe tab in the top right corner of the page. You can always send a note to support@fantasyguru.com, support@fantasyguru.com, saying, hey, I want to sign up for this package or that package. We've got the MVP package right now, which includes Armando and the team's basketball work, the hockey work, all those other sports. We've got the seasonal football that you can still get in on, the DFS football you can still get in on, the wagering football you can still get in on. Send that note to support@fantasyguru.com if that's an interest to you, or just click the subscribe tab in the top right corner of the page. Armando, as always, thanks for joining us today. We'll do this again in another week. Have a good rest of the week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. He's the smiling one, the happy one, the guy who always brings joy to the show on Tuesday. He's Armando Marsal. I am Ray Flowers. Thanks for watching the show today. Justin Fensterman, Rich Mileto tomorrow, 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I'll be back on Thursday and Friday here, as always, on Fantasy Sports Daily. For Armando, I'm Ray Flowers. This has been Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by FantasyGuru.com.